Limbo Lodge by Joan Aiken, Chapter 6. "Come with me," whispered a voice. "Come with me quickly, Mahina. Come with me quickly, Menina. You and your friends." It was the maid, Katerina. "You must not stay to meet the Gerente Manuel. They say he means you great harm." She led them along a passage to a large damp library, its walls lined with shelves and shelves of musty, leather-bound books which looked as if nobody ever read them. A dying fire faintly warmed in the air. In one of a pair of leather-covered armchairs, a red-faced man snored, fathoms deep in slumber. A fumy odor of wine came from him, and half a dozen empty bottles lay on the floor by his chair. Dozens of candles in wall sconces guttered and flickered toward their end. "Dear me," said Herodsfoot, "is that our host?" "Senor Don Enrique," said Katerina, "but he will not stir till noon. He never does. He is full of wine. You will be safe in this room. Nobody will think of looking for you here." "But why should we hide? We have done nothing wrong." Katerina looked impatient at Herodsfoot's simplicity. "Not you, perhaps, my lord, but your friends. First in the town hospital, the knife work done on that Otros man. Then in the prison, one of the guards killed. They say the doctor did that." "One of the guards killed?" said Talisman, astounded. "But I never touched any of the guards. Yorka's aunt, Tala'a, let me out while they were playing cows and leopard." "However that may be, a guard was killed and a page from the doctor's notebook was found on him." "Oh, Krupus," said Dido. "I reckon it must have been one of the two guards that nabbed me. They were fighting each other. They were half seas over and both had knives. One of them must have finished off his mate, and now they put the blame on Doc Tally. Well, but I could tell them how it really happened." "No," said Talisman, "that would not help. They will never believe you. They will not want to believe you. They will blame us both equally." "You must at once leave this house," insisted Katerina. "All of you." "Lord Herodsfoot's not accused of anything," objected Dido. "He could stop." "And you think I would stay behind?" he said. "When the rest of you have to flee through the forest, I agree it does seem the height of injustice. When, by what I am told, Dr. Talisman has almost certainly just saved that poor girl's life and brought her baby into the world. But I fear these Angrian folk are not at all reasonable, especially when it comes to the treatment of women." "Hush!" entreated Katerina. They could hear heavy footsteps and voices all over the house. Some passed the library door. They heard someone ask a question and apparently receive a negative answer. "So how are we to get away from here?" breathed Dido. "I show you Don Enrique's private way to stable." Katerina pulled back a section of shelves lined with sham books and opened a door. A flight of steps descended to a yard. Katerina led them round it, keeping in shadow, and so to the stables. She whispered something to a sleepy stable hand who, without argument, brought out their horses. In another yard, not far away, they could hear the stamping, shouting, clatter, and whinnying of the guards' troop, who had come in search of them. The noise drowned the sound of their own horses' hooves as they moved away down the track. "Katerina, thank you," whispered Dido. "I hope you won't be in trouble from this." No, Menahina. Why should they think of me? Now, make haste, make haste." The horses were rested, all except Talisman's mule, but it, luckily, had not had such a long journey on the previous day, and so they went quickly down the valley, occupied by the Quinquillo Ranch, and into another one where the forest grew thick and untouched. By now, the greenish light of dawn was beginning to flood the sky. Lord Herodsfoot was still spreading about their unceremonious departure. "No chance to say thank you to the old lady, not that she was very friendly, but after all, she did give us dinner and beds." "I wonder if she's a friend of Manuel Roy," said the doctor. Herodsfoot turned toward her eagerly. "Are you acquainted with that man? I believe I heard Dido say that you had met him in Europe." Yes, my father and I used to meet him here and there in gambling towns, and he often urged me to take a trip back to Aratu sometime, suggested that I should return to visit the place where I was born. Now I wonder why he did that, mused Herodsfoot. Do you think he can have had some private motive? Why do you say that? Ola soon told me, when I was staying with him and we were discussing affairs in Aratu, he said that Manuel is devastatingly ambitious. He would like to succeed his brother as ruler of the island. Also, he hates his brother, who stopped supplying him with money to travel to Europe. Apparently, there was some disgraceful episode. He cheated at cards or killed a man in a duel. The forest people, of course, know all these things. But why would Manuel want Doc Tally back here? Broke in Dido, who was riding with Yorka perched on her saddle bow a few paces behind the others. The island folk might like Tally better than him. If old King John's her father, if she's the heir, if she's the kid that got chucked in the sea. My dear, do you think you are that child? Herodsfoot asked Talisman. She replied simply, Yes, I do. Do you have any positive proof? Yes, my medallion, she said, with my name on it. Jane Curlingshaw. King's name was Curlingshaw before he changed it to King. Aunt Tala said so. Yes, said Herodsfoot, so I heard from Masoon. That seems quite conclusive. Wonder why he seems so glum about it, thought Dido. Do you have any ambition to become ruler of Aratu? Oh, good heavens, no, none, Talisman said impatiently. I want to be a doctor, a good one. Lord Herodsfoot looked a trifle more cheerful. A very proper ambition, he congratulated her. Now, does Manuel, do you think, know or suspect that you are his niece? Oh, yes, I'm sure he must, she answered. I can remember his asking my adopted father all kinds of questions about how and when he found me. Yes, it does seem to hang together. He wanted me back on this island for reasons of his own. Perhaps to kill me, do you think? To eliminate me as a possible rival? That was what he intended when he threw me off the cliff, perhaps. Yes, what has happened up to now does suggest that, and perhaps now he wants to have you under his control, so that he can use the threat of imprisonment for these trumped-up crimes to get you to do what he wants. He picked the wrong gal for that, thought Dido. I don't see Doc Talisman doing what any cove wants, not unless Tally wants it to, she said. Herodsfoot chuckled. I quite agree with you there. He gave an admiring, respectful look at the doctor. But Assoon was telling me about Manuel's plan. He has the support of the townspeople because they are nearly all Angrians. With their strict, gloomy, puritanical beliefs, and they let themselves be run by the town guard and lead very narrow lives. And treat females like toads, said Dido. Just so, but Manuel has little support from the forest people, who live so differently, and the forest people don't like him. Can you wonder? Their power lies in Kaneki, the witches. But why do they accept the rule of King John? He's not a forest person. No, but he was married to one and loved her very much, and adopted many of her ways. And it doesn't bother the forest people, and they don't bother him. The forest people have no ambitions, whereas the town people want to cut down more forest and plant more plantations. More forest people than town people, put in Tylo. Yeah, said Dido, but the town people are active and pushy, so they can get their way more than forest folk, who just want to sing creation songs and eat bark bread when they are hungry. That's it, said Herodsfoot. Exactly so. I think Manuel wants Dr. Talisman on his side because she would be acceptable to the forest people. Is already one of them, because of her mother. To them, she is a Kaneki. Yes, I am, said Talisman. I began to know it almost as soon as I came to Aratu. Dido thought of the scene in Manuel's courtyard. And then Aunt Tala'a told me so. Well, said Herodsfoot, it certainly seems as if the most important thing just now is for you to get to see King John before somebody tries to throw you back into jail. He sounded depressed again. What a one he is for ups and downs, thought Dido. Dr. Talisman evidently thought so too, for she said, "Enough of this conversation. Let us have a race. The forest is not so thick here. I will race you to the brook down there," she told Herodsfoot. "Are you ready? Go!" She kicked her mule into a canter and shot alongside of Herodsfoot, who, taken by surprise, needed a moment to get going, but soon overtook her, laughing and waving his hat. Then drew ahead. Dido, with the extra weight, not that it was much, of Yorka on her pony, did not try to compete, but rode soberly on down toward the stream. "He loves that duck," said Yorka, "from the minute he first see her." "Do you think so? I do too," Dido said sadly. "Why sad? Not bad to love." Golly good," said Tylo cheerfully. "Better than hate, anyhow. That Manuel, he hates the whole world." Dido could not explain the complicated pain she felt about Herodsfoot and Talisman. She was fond of them both. In fact, she thought they were two of the nicest people she had ever come across. But she felt that the road ahead of them was a very slippery and twisty one, and that however things worked out, the result might not be for the happiness of everybody. "That girl, back at the Quinquillo Ranch," she said. "That girl Louisa. Why was the old lady so angry?" "Because the father of that child, a forest person," said Tylo. "My uncle's cousin's son. Colbury. A Ria family, very angry about that." "Oh, I see," said Dido. "Why isn't Louisa with him in the forest?" "He dead. Don Enrique shoot him." Suddenly Dido had strong feelings of homesickness for Battersea, London. Battersea was dirty and ugly, maybe. The people who lived there were poor and tough. They had to buy their food. It did not grow on trees. But there was no dark background to them. They all knew each other and did what was expected. Nor did they shoot each other. Or not much. "There's too much blame mysteriousness about this island," she said. At the stream, where there was a ford, Herodsfoot and Talisman were waiting for the others, resting their horses, letting them drink. He was teasing her. "I don't believe you are really a Kaniki, or you wouldn't have let me beat you in that race." Dido thought of telling Herodsfoot how Talisman had climbed up the tower, but she decided not to. "Just the same, I am a Kaniki," Talisman retorted, "and by, when I see fit, I shall prove it to you." "Now I do remember you," Herodsfoot suddenly exclaimed. "You were the little girl in a tartan dress who used to sit sometimes rather impatiently on the steps of the casino at Bad Salzburg, playing tricotton in a tiny mother-of-pearl box, while the men were all inside playing faro and basset. And once you gave me a box of bonbons." "Did I? I had forgotten that." They smiled at each other. Tylo said, "Now we got to climb up, very steep, to reach the place of stones. Got to leave horses halfway up, too steep for them. You don't think Manuel and the civil guard will follow us here? Can't follow through forest, and nobody go on place of stones. Too bad luck. Only Halmahai and Kanaki people with strong soul. Most people too scared." "Somebody went there," said Dido, "and pinched the skull that Doc Tally has. Where did you come across it, Doc?" "My adopted father bought it for me one time when he was very rich, when he had won a huge amount of money at 456. He saw it in a curiosity shop in San Fermo, labeled Sacred Skull from Aratu, and he knew that I wanted a skull for my medical studies, so he bought it. He tried to find out who had sold it to the shop, and from the man's description he believed it was Manuel Roy. He knew that Manuel had lost heavily at the tables the day before. Manuel was always a wild gambler, lost more often than he won, and then suddenly he had plenty of money again. He had sold the skull. Must have brought it with him from the place of stones. It was quite brave of him to go and pinch it," remarked Dido. "If the place is supposed to be so spooky." "He be sorry later, by golly," said Tylo. "He be sorry by and by. The forest had thinned now into patches of giant fern and wild clove trees, with grassy, shrubby stretches in between. It was mild morning and growing very hot. Yorka showed Dido how to make a hat out of a huge yucca leaf, tied under the chin with grass. The horses were left tethered in a shady grove when the track became too steep for them to manage, inside a ring of candu nuts for protection against pearl snakes, whose bite was just as deadly to horses as to humans. Talisman slung the skull round her neck in an yucca leaf. The last part of the climb was exceedingly hard going. Here the ground was almost naked rock, silvery gray in color, and thinly covered with pale dust, which made it slippery and treacherous underfoot. "One thing at least, there's no snakes hereabouts," gasped Dido, when her feet had shot from under her for the 6th time and she picked herself up, cross, bruised, and scraped. "Snakes have got more sense than to climb this hill." Instead of snakes, there were birds, huge gray eagles floating almost motionless overhead. "Looking," Dido said, "as if for 2 yucca seeds they'd drop down and scrunch us up for their lunch." And she sighed, for it seemed a long time since the meal they had eaten at the Quinquillo Ranch the night before. They were now up so high that a large part of the island was visible behind them, the forest like a rug of thick, brilliant green fur. Beyond and all around, the celestial blue of the ocean. Ahead of them, slightly to the right or west, rose the conical peak of Mount Fura, dark with trees, up to half its height, then pale rock and scrub. "It was once a volcano," said Lord Herodsfoot, "but extinct now, I am happy to say." From his saddlebag he had taken a small telescope and carried it with him up the mountain. Through it he studied the prospect ahead. "I think I can see a house, high on the mountainside, I suppose. That is King's Palace. Limbo Lodge, strange name to give it. It looks so close from here, hard to believe it's still a day's journey away." Tylo took the glass from Herodsfoot and squinted through it. "Is so, that Limbo Lodge, but much far still, long gully hour walking, go down then up." "Yes, I see," said Dido, taking her turn with the glass. "There's a big gully in between us and that mountain, ain't there?" Between the two greens, the green of the forest on this side, dark emerald in color, and paler, grayer green of the woods on Mount Fura, there could be seen a distant gap. "Is there a river down there in the deep gorge?" "Kai River," said Tyler, nodding. "Very deep, fast river. Probable must go down to Cross Beach. Crocodiles, too." "Don't they have a bridge?" asked Dido, who did not fancy the sound of crocodiles. "Did have bridge. Old Sovereign John ordered smash, so I heard." "Why?" Tylo shrugged. "Don't want people to see him too easy." "But he's the ruler." "But he's the ruler," said Talisman. "It should be easy." "Do you think so?" said Herodsfoot. "Now, if I were the ruler, I should never wish to be bothered by subjects. I should sit in my study all day long, drinking Madeira wine and reading Latin poetry." "Oh!" She exploded with outrage and saw he was teasing her. "You should not say things like that, even in joke. It is a ruler's duty to listen to the needs of his people." "But he's deaf, poor old man, or so I understand. He simply can't hear what they ask him." "Yes, that is true," put in Yorka. "He not hear any voice at all. People talk to him. They write word in book. Some say he lose hearing when taken from place of stones." "Oh, well," said Dido hopefully. "In that case, when Doc Tally puts the skull back in its hidey hole, maybe the old cove will get back the use of his lung holes." "When do we get to this blessed place of stones, Tylo? My legs feel like banana peel." A warm, thick mist, damp and fresh, suddenly drifted down out of the sky as they climbed, and now hung close around them, blocking out the distant view. "Keep go straight uphill," said Tylo. "Hold hands." He took the hands of Dido and Yorka. Herodsfoot grasped the doctor's hand. "This is like the mist of Ireland, where I come from," he said. Have you ever been there, Talisman? No, never. It's a beautiful country. I should like to take you there some day, Dido sighed. They walked on cautiously through the thick whiteness. You ever been here before? Dido whispered to Yorka. Somehow the denseness of the mist, the lack of visibility, made it natural to whisper. Yorka shook her head. My auntie Tala'a come here at thunder time with other Kaniki to talk to the old ones. Who are they? They, Dido learned, were the ancestors who had put the stones in the place of stones at the beginning of things long, long ago. Many, many tree times. Don't this mist smell sweet? It's like breathing sugar and spice. Carry far sounds, too. This was true. A faint, distant drumming could be heard, even by the non-forest people. I suppose older soon, or your Aunt Tala'a would know what those drums were saying, Dido said to Yorka, and noticed a fleeting look of disquiet on Talisman's face. Suddenly the steep slope flattened. Unexpectedly they had come to the top of the rise and stood on level ground, still in a close group, clasping each other's hands, and at the same moment they realized that they were among the stones. 3 black monoliths reared up immediately around them, each one the height of a 2-story house. And a 4th slab was perched horizontally across the tops of the other 2. My word! Cried out Herod's Foot with immense enthusiasm. A cromlech! Or, as the Britons would have known it, a dolmen, and a very, very fine specimen. Peering about in the murk, they could see many more of the great stones close at hand, but all the others had fallen down. There were 9 fallen ones, Dido reckoned, and a number of the flat slabs, which must have rested on top, but many of those were shattered, so it was hard to decide how many there had been. Where do you think your skull ought to go, Doc? Dido murmured softly. Of the 3 standing stones, one was bigger than the 2 others, and stood apart from them. Talisman knelt down and examined its base. I've been told that the skulls were buried under the upright stones, but they seem to be standing on solid rock, she whispered. It is amazing that they just stayed standing for so long. They seem to be just balanced, not sunk into the ground. No, look, Doc. Dido had laid her cheek on the ground and was squinting closely to the base of another standing monolith. Then she went and studied one of the fallen stones. This is really clever. See, they were pegged on the ground. This one had a spur carved out on its underside that fitted into a slot on the rock below. A bit of the spur is busted off, but you can see how it was done. Here's the hole in the rocky ground where it went, and there's a matching bit of the spur still plugged in the hole. If I had a knife or a skewer, I believe I could prise it out. Herod's Foot was folding a knife, with an attachment for removing stones from horses' hooves. This proved just right for delving the broken section of rock out of the hole. Now I bet it fits onto the broken bit here below the big one, see? Dido said proudly and demonstrated. Yes, it does. But how in the world did they hoist all them monster stones up this mountain, let alone fitting them like keys into keyholes? Herod's Foot, meanwhile, was looking into the hole. This goes deeper than the piece you took out, Dido, he said, and thrust in his arm, groping about in the cavity. Yes, I thought so. See here. And withdrawing his hand, he triumphantly exhibited another skull black and coated with sand. Oh, put it back, cried Yorka and Talisman both together. Lord Herod's Foot looked a little dismayed. Oh, yes, I suppose you are right, he said sadly, gazing at the ebony-coloured skull. I do covet it, I must confess. It is such a very perfect specimen, it does seem a pity. No, quick, put it back, said Tylo, and Dido agreed. Honest, Mr. Lord Frankie, you better listen. The sound of drumming had intensified. The throbbing of the air was like the hum of giant bees. They heard voices. It was as if a window had been opened for a moment into a room where people were talking. Some of the words spoken were in unknown languages, deep and guttural, or sharp and bird-like. but some could be understood. A man's voice, loud and deep, said, "I will not have this." Other shriller voices could be heard begging, praying, "For mercy's sake! For mercy's sake!" Yorka and Tylo clung to each other white-faced. Dido and Herodsfoot looked around wildly. Talisman took 2 steps to Herodsfoot, removed the skull from his hands, and speedily returned it to the hole from which he had taken it. Then she said, "I think we should put something, a gift, to show we meant no harm." After a moment's frowning thought, she took out her little notebook, which Dido had returned to her, and tucked it into the hole with the skull. "Is well done," agreed Yorka, and added her necklace of nuts. Tylo put in a little knife made from a shell. Dido thought of her game cloth, but it was too large to go into the hole, so she cut off a lock of her hair with Tylo's knife. Herodsfoot, visibly grieving, added his tiny shell of the Gila nut oil. "You really think," he said. Their silent looks persuaded him. As Talisman replugged the hole with the piece of rock that had been cut to fit, the drumming died down to a whispering throb. Dido, looking sharply about, said, "Hey, I bet this is the hole where that so-and-so Manuel dug out the other skull. Look here, Doc Tally." She pointed to a hole in the ground near the base of one of the fallen stones, with a lump of square-carved rock, evidently the plug which had come from it, lying neatly. Talisman probed the hole, but it contained no skull. "I believe you're right, Dido." She slipped in the skull she had brought and plugged up the hole with the piece of rock, which fitted exactly. "There," she said. "Now we have done all we could. I think we should leave this place at once." Yorka and Tylo vehemently nodded their agreement. "Oh," pleaded Herodsfoot, "can't we stay just a few minutes? This is such a unique, such a truly remarkable sight. I would give anything to spend just a little more time here, or to come back here again." "Much, much good not come here," said Tylo, shivering. "If it were not so misty," lamented Herodsfoot. "If only I could make a drawing. I could write such an article for the Journal of Natural Philosophy." Talisman looked at him with sympathy. "Well, just for 5 minutes, then. Yorka, do you think—" She made a slight sideways beckoning motion with her head. She and Yorka moved away toward the biggest standing stone. Herodsfoot, absorbed in his own activities, was measuring, pacing, scribbling notes about the arrangement of the rocks on the hilltop and making little drawings. "It is like the devil among the tailors," he was muttering, "or dead wall. The distances are similar. And if I am not greatly mistaken—" Meanwhile, Talisman and Yorka touched hands, blew on their fingers, and breathed a few words to each other in turn. Tylo looked wholly disapproving. "Not good. Ask de Jingli of old ones," he muttered. "Not good, I think." De Jingli, Dido remembered, was favor or tip. Herodsfoot gave a cry of jubilation, for all at once the gray mist lifted, dispersed, and was gone in a flash. The 3 great monoliths, slightly glittering with damp, stood against a brilliantly blue sky, and a tremendous panorama was visible on every side of the hilltop. "Oh, bless my soul, what a piece of luck!" exulted Herodsfoot. "What good fortune! Couldn't ask for better, upon my word. This is capital, capital!" And he hurried even faster, pacing distances, reading his compass, taking bearing through his telescope. "Lord Herodsfoot, we must go now," urged Talisman after a few minutes of this. "We have a long distance to cover still, and we are very exposed, very visible here on the hilltop." Talisman was extremely pale. Beads of sweat trickled down her brow. "Oh, my dear girl, I know, but just a couple of minutes more." Now he was measuring the height of the monoliths. Dido had moved out from among the stones. They gave her the cold collywobbles, as she muttered to Tylo, and was studying the southern tip of the island through Herodsfoot's spyglass, which he had laid on a rock while he went to work with a tape measure. Dido had a good look at John King's residence, 2/3 of the way up Mount Fura. It was a largish white mansion, situated just at the edge of the tree line. Its grounds and shrubberies were surrounded by high walls. "And it's well guarded, too," Dido said to Tylo. "I can see dozens of coves all around it. Do you think they will let us in, Tylo? It don't seem mighty likely to me, not if Manuel gets there first and tells his tale. He'll tell King that Doc Tally and I are a pair of murderers, and that Cap Sanderson is a Jejela nut smuggler. Maybe so, said Tylo uncertainly. Best we get on, hurry. Get there first. Any chance you got a cousin there among the guard? He shook his head. Not I know. Dido turned the telescope eastward. Here, Mount Furra seemed to come to an abrupt stop. The gentle curve ended in a perpendicular line that ran straight down to the ocean. Blimey, is that the Cliff of Death? Tylo nodded. How high? I know not. Cliff is sacred place. No one allowed there, unless they go to jump. Maybe 300 men high? Dido had not the least guess how high that might be. She thought, if the top of the cliff was a forbidden place, and Manuel went there to throw the baby over, that's another black mark he chalked up against himself with the old uns who set up the stones. I reckon he's in for big trouble by and by. I only wish it would come soon. Please, Lord Herodsfoot, you must come away. A moment, just let me get the dimensions of the big fellow. Now, with his tape, he was measuring the circumference of the biggest monolith. We'll all be blessed, exclaimed Dido. She had tracked the telescope down to the little harbor where the Kai River ran out into the ocean at the eastern base of Mount Furra. Mount Furra was, in fact, a small, steep island separated from the rest of Aratu by the Kai Ravine, and in the harbor, Dido remembered it was called Manitai, there was a fishing village. And there was a fishing village, was Aratu's only beach, all the rest of the coastline being craggy rock that fell straight into the sea. What you see? Inquired Tylo. There's the Sawara, in that little harbor. She's just tying up. Come and see, Doc Tally, she called, but Talisman was saying to Herodsfoot, Listen, my friend, I lifted the mist for you, which was hard work. You have had time to do your drawings. Now you really must be sensible and come. He burst out laughing. Oh, you lifted the mist. Oh, my dear girl, come on. The mist was just a happy accident. Very sorry, but you can't take credit for that. She gave him a very cool look. Is that what you think? My dear, it's what I know. Very sorry, but I'm not buying that one. Now, just one more job. He placed his compass on the ground and made some calculations. Dr. Talisman was angry. 2 small red spots appeared on her cheekbones. She pressed her lips tightly together. Then she said, You wish to return to this place? Of course, very, very much. If not on this visit to Aratu, then on some future visit. You don't really believe I am a Kaniki, do you? My dear, I am quite sure that you believe it. Well, I will show you something. Talisman picked up a small bone that was lying in the dust at the feet of the great monolith. Herodsfoot's eyes widened. He exclaimed, Why, great heavens! I believe that is a man's finger bone. Never mind that. What is your full name? My full name? He was puzzled. Is Algernon, Francis, Sebastian, Fortinbras, Carsleuth, Baron Herodsfoot. Using the bone, Talisman wrote these names on the smooth, dusty rock. Now, she said, that writing will remain there until your next visit. He was very much amused. That's a safe promise, when you know the chances against my coming back here are about 100 to 1, maybe 500 to 1. Chuckling, he paced away from his writing tablet. He packed away his writing tablet and prepared to descend the hill. But it is a very, very kind gesture, my dear, and I am greatly obliged to you. I shall take the will for the deed. And that is the end of chapter 6.